Hi everyone, my name is Ben. I'm the talent partner here at Seldon. Today I have with me Alex as the first guest of our Seldon Team Spotlight series, where we'll be taking a closer look really at sort of what makes our team tick. Alex, thank you for coming on. I guess to kick things off, do you sort of want to maybe briefly describe your role, sort of your responsibilities?
Yeah. So, hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm a software engineer here at Seldon. Currently, I'm leading one of the working groups for the next iteration of our enterprise product. I work largely on the back end and to some extent on sort of infrastructural, operational side of what we do, internally looking at how that affects customers.
Cool.
But with a few changes, the team's looking to be a bit more full stack, so being glad to dabble my toes a little bit into the front end side of things as well.
Nice. And I guess how did you sort of get into sort of software engineering originally? What was your sort of story into the industry?
Yeah. So I suppose all the way back at the start of university and arguably a little bit before that, I quite like statistics. At university, that starts to look a bit more like data science.
Cool.
So doing that tied into more electives in third and fourth years. So around data science, around machine learning. But then, well, that led me into my first job, which was as a data scientist.
Nice.
So a lot of analytics and stuff there. But what I found was quite a lot of that actually looks like a lot of data cleaning, preparation, some data engineering. All of that can take quite a lot of time before you really get to the value to deriving insights from data, which is a bit I like about that. I found that with just the way the team was back then, in the company I was in, that actually I was also taking on a lot more of the engineering side of things, and that was quite interesting. So my next role, I shifted much more into a software engineering role with a focus on data engineering.
Okay.
So kind of a lateral step. But then looking at that and wanting to do a bit more, sort of be a bit closer to things, have a bit more impact, led to wanting to join a startup. So that's how I ended up at Seldon.
Nice, here you are. And what was it about sort of Seldon that sort of piqued your interest?
That's a good question. There are a number of things. So I suppose, like I said, one of the things was I've gone from quite large companies to increasingly small ones, where you can have that much more of an impact in what you're doing. You have much more influence in how the product's designed, what you're building, understanding how that interacts with the customer, what do they need from it. I say customer, we do open source as well as enterprise, so really end user. So there's that side of it of actually having an impact. And that ties into then having autonomy about what we're doing, how we do it. Generally being able to be quite engaged and drive the product forward is nice.
What was the transition like in terms of going from a large company into a sort of smaller startup?
It was actually quite natural in that, having had a bit of a background in understanding organizational processes and what things look like, how larger enterprises need to work, that has really helped in one, having the ability to develop technical skills, but also understanding how the business sits around that. So joining a smaller company meant that I could bring some of those learnings, but then, well, because it's smaller, you get to do more things.
Really
Really the difference is about just taking on more different roles, wearing more hats. Which is exactly what I'd expected. So exactly what the hats are. Sure, that varies as time goes on and exactly what the team needs. There's that kind of transitioning.
Cool. And I guess in terms of the structure that we've got here at Seldon, for those that don't know, what does the team sort of structure look like, and where do you sit within that?
The team structure as a whole, within the company, but specifically within tech, is really quite flat.
Okay.
So we've got Clive, who's our CTO. Below him, you've got Gaminda as the VP of Engineering, and Arlo and Yanis on the data science side. So there's nominally a bit of a separation there, but actually the teams tend to work quite a lot together. The last few months, there are a number of initiatives which are really tightly coupled. So the teams are integrating a lot. So under those is then everyone else, but that's just the management structure. In terms of actual practical day-to-day work, it's very common to be interacting with anyone sort of up and down that. So in that sense, it's not just flat because there aren't many layers, but also because you're interacting a lot with everyone who's normally more senior or in management. So I've done quite a lot of work with client, for example. It's common that I might be reviewing a PR from Gminder or vice versa, particularly around some of our internal ops and all that side of it.
Super, thanks. And I guess in terms of sort of technology, the tools, what do what languages do you sort of work with? What are the main sort of tools and technologies that you're working with?
So the main back-end language is Golang.
Okay.
Which really is where we came from. So Seldon Core was built to be Kubernetes native, deploy, very closely integrated in its original forms again, Kubernetes native. So Kubernetes is written in Go, therefore it's pretty natural that we would also be doing that because it just works well. So that's our main backend language. On the front end side, it historically has been JavaScript, but is now moving more towards TypeScript on top of Node and React as main frameworks. But then there are other things around that. So the data side of it and tools like projects like ML Server, so the actual inference server, are written in Python because that's just a natural way with all the libraries that you need. For Core V2, we introduced something a little bit unusual.
For those that don't know, Core V2.
So Core V2 is the next version of our open source serving platform. There's Core V1, Core V2 takes the learnings we have from that around how you actually model the different concepts within it, how you handle serving those, and then adding on things for efficiency. So it's a bit nicer to do that. When you're using a lot of stuff, you don't want to be using, when you have a lot of models, you don't want to be using as much hardware. So it's that kind of efficiency gain. With Core V2, we've also added in Kotlin as another language, so JVM language, which is about what we're doing with the data flow engine, where it's just a very natural fit for the Kafka Streams library. But then aside from that, there are still a few other things.
What's going on by the sounds of it?
Yeah, there's sort of little bits of glue that you need to put together. So you'll have bash scripts for this and that. If you're doing instant investigations, you'll get other bits and pieces.
Super. And I guess if we're looking at some of the recent, projects that you've been working on, can you maybe give us an example of where your sort of technical background, your technical expertise has really played a bit of an impact in the success of those projects, and maybe what they look like?
Yeah, so for this one, I think probably a good example is around Core V2. There are a few examples there. So the very start of that was Clive, the CTO, and myself doing a lot of the design and implementation before Sharif joined us more full-time on that. So a lot of the early design was heavily influenced there, and think about what kind of data stores, structures, architecture we wanted. But aside from that, so I mentioned the data flow engine. The fact that we could use that as a Kotlin application, well, that relies on Kafka Streams, which is a Java library. The team generally doesn't really have a lot of experience on the entire JVM side. So having someone who does have more experience in that was really the enabler for we can actually do this. Without that, it would be a very different tool where we would have had to essentially rewrite a lot of that low-level streaming functionality ourselves. That would take a lot more time. It would look different. It would be just generally probably a very different tool. Might be integrated in a different way with the architecture, with model gateway, for example. So in terms of that, having, like I said, someone who is familiar with the JVM environment from where I worked previously, that had a big impact on what we could choose as a design. More generally around how we use Kafka as well, having a bit of experience there and familiarity with the technology and the principles of it. Could be very relevant for how we approach problems.
Very nice. And I guess that probably goes a lot for people joining the business, coming from different backgrounds, different technical backgrounds. I guess that's a good example of where sort of a different technical expertise has been able to be implemented in terms of your day-to-day and made a bit of an impact.
Yes. Pretty much everyone, I think, has a bit of a different background or where they come from, the kinds of industries and roles they've been in before. So actually bringing all that in does tend to
people think differently, different solutions, different problems, and all that sort of stuff.
You tend to get a better overall output because people go, oh, actually, maybe I've seen something very much like this before. That happened a few times where it really is the same idea. Different technology, different implementation, but the same idea and the same pattern is something that someone's recognised and gone, well, I know from previous experience what maybe has or hasn't worked very well. So having people come in who do that and bring something new to the team is good.
Super, brilliant. I guess if we're going to look in terms of maybe how you stay up to date with, changes, different trends, different advancement in the industry. I guess the ML landscape is sort of constantly evolving and constantly changing. How does that sort of translate into your role here at Seldon?
So I suppose there are two questions there.
There is.
So how do I stay up to date is probably the easier one to answer first. Historically, and maybe a little bit less so right now, but historically Reddit's been a really good source.
Reddit was that?
Yeah, Reddit.
Okay,
Yeah. The subreddits like r/programming have a lot of really good content, and they link to a lot of other good sources. So finding good blogs from that and thinking, okay, this is something that has good ideas, maybe creates them very well. That kind of thing. Other aggregators serve the same kind of purpose. Generally, just thinking, I've heard about something, maybe I should go do a bit more research. Occasionally, people will post links to perhaps research papers or white papers that whatever body has put out. So again, just kind of keeping on top of that, skimming it a bit.
Yeah. Is that like a regular for you? Do you go onto Reddit quite a lot to find sort of different topics, or is it sort of specifically for sort of projects that sort of come up?
Well, for me, it's general browsing, and then occasionally there's something specific where I think I want to know a bit more.
Yeah, please find out about
that. But I think overall it's a bit of a mix between, people tend to be focused on what they're doing, so naturally you do research on that. You want to find out more about it, so they'll find it and then they'll share it back to the rest of the team. It might be just chatting about it in the office, it could be in a Slack thread. Could be doing something like a lunch and learn. If there's something that's a bit bigger, a bit meatier to get into, those can be a good way of having a broader discussion and kind of disseminating knowledge and not just hearing about it, but actually talking through it, understanding what makes sense, how that applies to us. And certain people in the company are really good for that. Arno and Yanis and the data science team tend to be very much up to date. Clive and Shreve again on the ML Ops side.
So lots of information sharing sort of across the team and across the department.
Very much so, yeah.
Good. And I guess, and then in terms of the translation from that into your role, how's that sort of been?
It's a bit of a mix. So I think certain things are just good general background. They build understanding, they build knowledge. So around software development, engineering, architectural practices. Those are things which are reasonably well understood, but it's important to understand them. So those just generally fit in. It's not sort of specific, this thing fits in right here. Although there are cases where you realise, actually, I learned about something that's a great use case. Sometimes it is more specific. So it might be that we do want to start doing some research on something and someone might share some links. Already know a bit. So talk to them, start to get an idea there. Because there's a particular project or an idea. And sometimes it's just people having ideas and thinking, actually, this could be cool to look into. So why don't we do that? And trying it out a bit. Sometimes it is, it is more
bit of a mixed bag.
It's hard to pick out really particular example.
I think if we're going to look at there's lots of challenges in the industry, and I guess probably in your role, there's challenges on a daily basis. But if we're looking at maybe some of the biggest challenges that you sort of faced, maybe throughout your time here, what does that sort of look like? Can you give an example of maybe some of the challenges that you come up against, and sort of maybe how you overcome those as well?
I think some of the biggest challenges are not necessarily technical ones, actually.
That's interesting.
We tend to be quite ambitious in what we're trying to achieve with our projects. So it's good to be ambitious. It's good to set our sights on something and go for it. But it's also then going, okay, well, how do we break that down into something that's achievable?
A bit more flexible,
find some kind of deliverable value. How do we get there? And do that in a way that's kind of structured, that isn't all or nothing, that allows us to develop more incrementally. So it's that kind of, we're taking a big bite. Can we make sure we can chew it? So there's not a concrete answer to how do you do that, but it's that kind of thing of just being conscious of how we prioritize, how we allocate our time, and just being focused and thinking, okay, maybe something's taking a bit too long. Maybe I need to do a bit of research here and explore different things and think what feels like a good way forward, discuss that with a few people, just get a sense of, is this, I think this looks good, am I missing something? And then proceed.
And how do you sort of plan around that? So do you sort of work in sort of sprints? Do you sort of work on specific problems? What sort of structure do you take in terms of prioritizing different sort of working sets, or what the focus is on each quarter?
That's something that changes.
Okay.
And so I've been here a couple of years now, coming up to a couple of years. And that's changed as we work through it. You know, the team's grown, people have joined, a couple of people have left.
Yeah.
So generally we try to keep updating it to what works for us now. So if something's not working, we'll reflect on that and think, okay, what might be a good way forward? So historically, when I joined, we were working approximately sprints. It wasn't Scrum in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
It's a bit more like Kanban, but with a 2-week cadence. These days, the last 3-6 months, say, we've switched to much more of a working group focus. So we've got smaller teams focused on, so they're cross-functional teams, generally a bit of data science, a bit of back-end, a bit of front-end engineering.
Yeah.
Focused on a particular problem. And then it's up to the particular working group as to how they want to do that. So, you know, it might be, okay, let's look a week ahead, plan a week ahead, see what do we think is achievable. Here's our goal. Here's what we think we can do towards it. It might be 2 weekly. It might be more of a Kanban style, continuous. Okay, let's just look ahead at the next step rather than trying to go too far ahead. So it really varies as to what the working group wants it to be, but it does keep adapting.
Yeah, and I guess you guys work quite a lot with, well, across the business really in tech. So that includes working with, you know, sales, working with, you know, sometimes marketing, obviously working with product. How do you sort of collaborate with the wider business in your role?
Again, it depends on exactly what we're doing and what kind of interaction there needs to be. So, you know, it might be that someone's reported an issue, in which case it might be that someone just picks that up. You know, for example, if it's on one of the open source libraries, someone could just pick that up and go, okay, I'm going to do this now.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there's not a lot of collaboration required with the wider business. More on the enterprise side, the people I tend to collaborate with the most would probably be solutions and the product team. So solutions engineering is looking at, okay, for our enterprise customers, what do they need? How do they achieve things? So they've been really good about picking up information. I'm not just saying how do you do it, but understanding the mechanisms around that, potentially taking someone from the tech team and just having a sort of knowledge sharing session there, so they can have an introduction to a topic, understand it enough, and then go and maybe create some kind of a workshop off the back of that, and then come back and check a few details. It could be that they have proposals and we're just reviewing those, sanity check, making sure that what they put in is complete. There might be a few extra things, might be minor changes. There's that sort of thing. It might be also actually interacting with them, with customers. So
do you jump on calls with customers yourself as well?
Yeah, sometimes it's if there's some kind of an issue or a debugging session, it could be that. We just need a bit more of knowledge of, you know, how does the product work, therefore what might be going on. It might be, again, sort of a knowledge sharing session for the customers to have just that time, again, with someone who's a domain expert who has more knowledge, so really dig into what they want to know. Things like that. For product, it tends to be much more customer feedback, design, where do we want to go next. So that tends to look more like using kind of whiteboarding or online whiteboarding tools.
What sort of whiteboarding tools do you guys use?
Miro in particular is really nice. That's my favourite one so far. It's just, it works nicely. It does what I want it to. It's easy. Doesn't get in the way. It could be that. It could be sort of functional specifications, understanding the requirements process, discussing technical feasibility of different things, and how that then feeds into prioritization. So, you know, someone might want something, but actually how is it deliverable? Are there different bits of value? Is it that what they're asking for is actually really specific and we could generalize it, provide something that would be useful to more people, in which case it's kind of that discussion. How do we want to approach these things?
Good. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, there's probably a lot that you've been able to get involved with. You've been here probably coming up to 2 years now. If you're looking back on those 2 years, there's obviously been lots of changes, both to the product, the open source stuff, as well as the enterprise product. If you're looking back on some of your work, what would you say is one of the things that you're most proud about, what you've delivered?
I think there are a couple of things I would pick here. So there's not so much a deliverable, but it was the fact that a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, one of my co-workers, so a PhD student at Cambridge who's working part-time with us, Andre, him and I were presenting at Kafka Summit. So, big industry conference on what people are doing with Kafka, what's up to date, how we're using streaming technologies. So going and giving a presentation about Core V2 and specifically about what the data flow paradigm is, which is what Core V2 is based on, and how we actually implemented that. Giving a talk on that to an entire audience of highly technical people. All of that is really cool. So that is
how big
my night. Remarkably smoothly. We put a lot of effort into the slides, and it all went actually really nicely. So that kind of thing really, it's great to be able to share that because we've got the open source there. We can talk about it, and then all the work we do can actually feed into other things. You can just have that much more engagement with the community.
Yeah, do you go to a lot of conferences? Is that fairly normal, or is that something one of the first ones that you've actually delivered yourself?
So that's my first time presenting at a conference, but I've been to a few others with Seldon. So last year there was GopherCon we were sponsoring, and then also attending. We've gone to that for a few years as attendees. We attended Kafka Summit last year, just as normal guests going to learn what we could and get a sense of things. There are things like AI Summit, which again we sponsor, but generally across the team we do a mixture of going to conferences that we think would be useful and have valuable information, but also presenting. So a few people, for example, have presented at MLOps summits or at KubeCon even. So again, big, well-known conferences. So we definitely see that as an important thing for learning and for sharing.
Good, brilliant. I think in terms of the sort of last area that we want to look at, it's sort of more around the sort of culture and sort of what Seldon has to offer from a sort of a culture perspective. I guess you've sort of touched on some of the conferences that you've gone to, and maybe where people would like to interact with Seldon, where they have the opportunity to sort of do so. I guess from your experience, how does the sort of tech team foster a good culture, and what would you say is the sort of the main areas that you enjoy about working with Seldon?
Okay. So I think it comes down to, again, a mixture of different things. It's not one single thing that makes it really nice. There's the fact that it is that kind of flat hierarchy and it's very open. So like I said, for Core V2, I've been working directly with Clive for the better part of a year. Directly just having calls, chatting on stuff, reviewing one another's PRs. So that level of openness and also trust. Someone who I'd only just joined the company when that project was taking off. Literally, it was about a month later.
Straight into the deep end.
But the fact that I've just joined and I'm being trusted to have a big impact on the design, the implementation of something really important to us, I think speaks about the culture there and the fact that people who join are taken seriously, opinions are respected. If we've got ideas, if we have thoughts on things, we can share those, and just sometimes it's just getting feedback, kind of bouncing ideas around, thinking, does it even make sense? But it's taken seriously. There's a real conversation there. We can discuss things.
You have the opportunity to make an impact.
We don't always agree.
You hope not.
but it's okay, because it's about the process of disagreement that helps to find what does make sense, what feels like the right way forward.
So that agree with that.
So it's actually, I think, a good thing that we're not. If we all had exactly the same views all the time,
that
would be a bit wild. So the fact we have different views and contrast those is good. I already mentioned autonomy and that side of it, knowledge sharing, things like lunch and learns. Again, where there's that just ability to actually have a conversation about tech and share knowledge, because basically you think something's cool. Again, in the time I've been here, I've given various different talks about things like some of the internals of Go and the type system, about stream processing, about how the command line tool is actually a really good example of a stream processor. Basically, just because I thought these are interesting topics, are things that I wanted to learn more about myself. And I thought, well, hey, maybe other people want to listen, and people did. So, have a nice talk. So it's all of that side of it where having a core team of people who are really engaged with what they're doing, find it interesting, have a lot of creativity and innovative ideas, makes for an interesting sort of workplace and environment. And then having a team that is collaborative makes that a really pleasant place to work in.
Good, good. And I guess if we're looking at sort of the your team as well, the tech team itself, how many are in the tech team at the moment?
I think the entire tech team is about 25 people now.
Okay.
Split as about half data science, about half on core engineering.
Super. And if there was,
I should also mention there is the MLOps team. So
you forgot about one of the teams.
Yeah, that's my MLOps team actually. The project like quite significant. That's
how are the teams. We mentioned that it was split up. So you've got MLOps, you've got sort of the deploy team more generally, which is sort of software engineering. You've got the data science team, and then you've got the MLOps team. Is that right?
Yeah, MLOps, ML engineering.
Fine.
So kind of all the other things around it. It's currently a bit more MLOps, but we're looking towards making that more on the kind of the research side of the engineering there. How we do various things like optimizing models and making particular use cases work, and just exploring that, as well as coming up with a practical implementation.
Sure.
All of that's within the remit of that team.
Brilliant. And if we're looking at the tech team itself, do you guys have any unique or unusual office traditions or celebrations in the department or across the business more generally?
That's
it's a bit of a curveball, that, isn't it?
I wouldn't say necessarily unusual, but I would say that we've got, probably due to myself, I very much believe in the principle of being the change you want to see in the world. And if you've got an idea,
I agree,
go for it and see if people will kind of join in. One of those things is I quite like having a cake culture.
Me too.
So you have a birthday, it doesn't have to be cake, but you bring in something, you come back from holiday, you bring in something, you have a child.
All of the main events.
Yeah, any kind of semi-significant event you felt like baking over the weekend, you bring in a cake.
Nice.
So having that kind of thing is quite nice. Again, it's just a point of just water cooler chat. You're discussing things that's quite informal and relaxed. So that, I suppose, maybe that counts as a bit of a tradition now. And the other one, which I think should count as a tradition, is at the last town hall, we managed to convince Clive to do a little bit of a rap before he started his proper presentation. So with a bit of luck, we can turn that into a proper tradition and get it all energetic and pumped up for it, because it worked really well.
More on that to come then. Super. I think that's pretty much all we wanted to sort of cover today. So thanks very much for joining. That's all right.
Lovely.